in a row.
All president accounted for us. Sergeant Tucky. Anthony must have went to lunch.
Mayonnaise. Can't hear you, Isaac.
Man, I keep forgetting to mute. Does he pronounce his name Heritage or Heritage?
Heritage.
Heritage. Okay.
I'm going to give him a call.
Okay. Morning, Leslie.
Hello.
So good morning, everyone. While Danielle is getting in contact with the speaker, I'm just going to give everybody a brief overview of today's presentation. So throughout this whole month, the focus for Black History Month has been health and wellness. However, today we have a special guest with extensive career in law enforcement, and he's going to speak about his experiences and the impact he has had on our community and society in general. Um, Before the speaker is presented and his bio is read by Danielle, I'd like to give a brief history about one of our our forefathers in the law enforcement community. His name was Bass Reeves. And you might ask, who is Bass Reeves? He was born July 1838. Um, he was born to a slave in the 1830s in Texas. Um, Bass was owned by Colonel Reeves, who taught him to shoot, ride, and hunt, but would not let him learn to read. Bass grew to be a strong, physically impressive, and determined man who ran away at the age of 20 to be free. Pursued by slave hunters, he narrowly escaped into the Indian Territory, where Creek Indian warriors accepted him into their tribe. This was not uncommon during this time period. Bass learned to speak Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole. It is believed that Bass fought in the Indian Territory during the Civil War with the Union Indian Brigades. The inventory at this time was a cesspool of violence. In 1875, President Ulysses Grant named Congressman Isaac Parker a federal judge at Fort Smith with a mandate to save Oklahoma. He was known as the hanging judge. He was soon to be known um, by that moniker. He brought in 200 deputy marshals to calm the growing chaos throughout the West at this time. The Indian Territory, later to include the Oklahoma Territory in 1890, was the most dangerous area for federal peace officers in the Old West. More than 120 lost their lives before Oklahoma became a state in 1907. One of the first deputies hired by Judge Parker's court was former slave from Texas, Bass Reeves. Bass was known as an expert with the pistol and rifle. Stood about 6'2" and weighed 180 pounds and was said to have superhuman strength. You know those folklores. Being a former slave, Bass was illiterate. He would memorize his warrants and rights. In the 32 years of serving the people of Oklahoma Territory, it is said he never arrested the wrong person due to the fact he couldn't read. Bass had a reputation throughout the territory for his ability to catch outlaws that other deputies couldn't. He was known to work in disguise in order to get information and effect the arrest of fugitives he wanted to capture. Bass is said to have arrested over 3,000 persons and killed 14 outlaws, all without sustaining a single gun wound. Bass escaped numerous assassination attempts on his life. He was the most feared deputy U.S. Marshal to work with the Indian Territory. At the age of 67, Bass Reeves finally retired from federal service at Oklahoma statehood in 1907. As an African American, Bass was unable to continue in his position as deputy marshal under the new state laws. He was hired as a city policeman in Muskogee, Oklahoma, where he served for about 2 years until his death in 1910 at age 71. So that's just a brief history of our law enforcement lineage, and Mr. Heritage is directly a descendant from that law enforcement line.
Hi, I'm Danielle Mackey. I am the co-chair of the African American Relations Committee at Stratton VA Medical Center, and I am glad to say that our honored guest is here. I will be reading his biography, and then he will present afterwards. So John Heritage retired from public service with the New York State Police in 1995 after 30 years of hard work. He is also a retiree of Albany Medical Center. He retired in 2019. And at Albany Medical Center, he served as the Vice President of Security Services, which he was responsible for the safety of over 10,000 employees, students, residents, and patients included. He originally is a native of Buffalo, New York. He graduated from Bennett High School and the State University at Buffalo, where he earned his Bachelor's of Science in Criminal Justice. He began his law enforcement career, as I mentioned, in the field of criminal justice. He started his first position with as a deputy sheriff with the Erie County Sheriff's Department in 1965, where he was assigned to highway patrol throughout the county. On November 13th, 1967, Mr. Heritage joined the New York State Police, where he graduated #1 in the class and was elected by his classmates as spokesperson for the recruitment graduation. This distinction earned him the Superintendent's Award. During his 21-year career with the state police, Mr. Heritage achieved a series of firsts for an African American as he rose through the ranks of sergeant, lieutenant, BCI captain, major, troop commander, and inspector. Upon his retirement from the state in 1988, he was a staff inspector, the highest ranking officer of African American descent in the organization. While with the state police, some of his assignments included being detailed to the Drug Enforcement Task Force in New York City, being part of a special security team at the 1980 Winter Olympic Games in Lake Placid, New York, and served as commander of operations during the New York State Thruway Bridge collapse incident in April of 1987. He was also detailed to the New York State Police Academy, where he was one of 4 officers assigned to write the sergeant's and lieutenant's promotional examination. He was subsequently detailed to the Alabama State Police in Montgomery, where he assisted in their corporal and sergeant's promotional examinations as they attempted to diversify their command structure. For this effort, in addition to the commendation of appreciation, he was appointed an honorary lieutenant colonel aide de camp in the Alabama State Militia by the late Governor George C. Wallace. It should be noted that in 78, Mr. Heritage, along with 8 other African-American troopers, became part of a litigation that had a profound effect upon the New York State Police and led to diverse numbers of members that are troopers today. In October of 1988, then Governor Mario Cuomo appointed him Deputy Commissioner of the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services. In that position, Mr. Heritage was the primary liaison between the executive branch of state government and local law enforcement agencies. In addition, he was the executive director of the Municipal Police Training Council. During his 6.5-year tenure at the Division of Criminal Justice Services, in addition to overall responsibility for the training needs and requirements of law enforcement agencies within New York State, he was responsible for the statewide implementation and administration of the Drug Abuse Resistant Education, also known as DARE, and the New York State law enforcement accreditation programs, as well as the training standards for the Security Guard Act of 1992. Mr. Heritage has received numerous commendations and recognitions, among which are named Outstanding Alumni, State University College at Buffalo, recipient of Black Achievers in Industry Award, named Man of the Year by the Buffalo Special Gun and Rifle Club, named Man of the Year by the New York State Minorities in Correction, recipient of the School of Criminal Justice Distinguished Public Service Award, SUNY at Albany, recipient of Computer-Wide Smithsonian Annual Inventors Award, acknowledged in the first and second editions of Black First by Jesse Carney Smith. Mr. Heritage is a deacon at Macedonia Baptist Church, yay, and a member of the Beta Psi Boule Sigma Phi Alpha fraternity. He and his wife Fanny reside in the Albany area and have special projects of providing assistance to those in need and participate in special projects to assist those in need during the holiday season. And like I said earlier, our guest of honor is here, and we welcome whatever knowledge and experience he has to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. And I'm sorry I'm a little late today. My wife has some medical problems we've been dealing with, but I'm here. I'm going to do the best I can this afternoon. And I just want to tell you that I'm honored and happy to spend some time with you today. And I thought about what I could talk to you concerning the Black History Month. And since I spent over 55 years working in the criminal justice system, I thought I would talk to you about my journey and career through that system. And then we could have a Q&A session, and hopefully you won't find what I talk about too boring. As Danielle said, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and began my career in law enforcement in 1965 when I was employed by the Erie County Sheriff Department as a deputy sheriff. In 1967, I joined the New York State Police, and at that time was the 9th person of color to become a New York State trooper. In 1968, another person of color joined, and that made 10 of us in a force of 3,500. We call ourselves the original 10. We did that because, you know, we were 10 males of color that joined the state police and stayed to make a career out of it. So when I went off to the recruit school, it was held in Smollinger's Pleasant View Lodge in Cairo. At that time, they did not have a state police academy. It was in the process of being built. And I think we were the last class to go to the lodge, to go to the recruit school. And it was about 80 recruits there. And of course, I was the only one of color there. And it was there that I found racist attitudes that were there among some of the some of the troopers. And there was one incident where we were going through defensive tactics training. And during that training, they were teaching us how to defend ourselves. And there was an accident where I went and fell on my head and had a hairline fracture to my neck. And they took me to Albany Med, which is really ironic because years later I came to work at Albany Med. But anyway, they took me to Albany Med, and I was there for about a week. And when I returned back to the class, there were 4 troopers who I saw marching around the building with nightsticks. And I said, "What's that all about?" And my roommate at the time, who was from New York City, and we had become pretty close, and he told me, well, while I was in the hospital, we had Smollinger's had waitresses that would wait on the tables for the troopers, the recruit troopers. And while I was in the hospital, they came to visit me. And so he said to me, he said, well, he said, I don't know how to say this. He said, but the 4 of them got together or went to the waitresses and called them with the N-word, called them in-lovers. And he said the lieutenant in charge, that was their punishment. They were marching. So obviously, you know, I was taken aback by that, but Kerry was able to carry on. And then another thing that happened while I was that had a profound effect upon me was the riot at Attica. And to this day, I still have I have thoughts about that whole thing, that just a profound effect, because obviously at the time, as I said, there were only 10 troopers of color, and I was stationed out in that area. And I wound up being the only one of color to be a trooper of color to be at Attica. And obviously, you know, with the tear gas and everything that went on, it was just a really profound effect. To this day, I think back at it and, you know, just thank God that he carried me through it. I can remember my partner, as we rode out to Attica, saying to me, he said, and it's very profound, he said to me, you know, you're about to see man's inhumanity to man. And lo and behold, we saw that. So anyway, during this whole thing, we, in 1977, the original 10, we got together, well, 9 of us got together and decided that, you know, we weren't getting promoted. We were, after all these years, there were only 10 of us on the job. And so we decided, called it the Justice Department. And at that time, they were looking to all the state police organizations across the country to see what they could do about diversifying these state law enforcement departments. And I can remember we talked to one of the lawyers there, and he said, well, we were looking at New York State very hard. She said, but we didn't have a complainant to file a lawsuit. So we said, well, you've got complainants now. So that was in 1967. So as a result of that, Judge Foley, I'll never forget him, he ordered that the state police hiring from then on would be 50% white, 40% minority males, and 10% females. So as you see the state police today, the makeup of the state police today, there are females, there are more minorities, and that is a result, definite result of that lawsuit that was filed. And as Danielle spoke to you about my promotions as I went through the state police, various promotions that I had. And one of them is when I was a BCI captain at Canandaigua, I got detailed to the Alabama State Police, where they were trying to diversify their department. And it was funny, I went down there and it was twice I went. And I can remember how things get so ironic that I can remember as a young man seeing George Wallace stand in front of the University of Alabama, a staunch segregationist, saying that they would never allow blacks to enter the university. And at the time, he had been shot and he was in a wheelchair. And his whole demeanor and I guess his whole thoughts had changed. And it was funny that I sat there with him, with others, and having lunch at the Capitol with George Wallace, who I saw as I said, a young man standing there as a segregationist. And that was something that I guess I'll never forget. And so Danielle told you about the rest of my career. And so I don't need to go into that, but I just want to close by saying that I talk about my career, but we have the original 10 that we had. 8 of them have passed on and gone to glory. There's only 2 of us left. And it was their courage that stood up to change things. And we did change, and we made a difference in the New York State Police. And you can see that it is a diversified law enforcement agency of today. We have a deputy superintendent that's of color. You have females there. We even have a person of color as a major over at G Troop now. So I'm very happy and very pleased. I'm very proud of those that stood by and have gone on to glory. And I just want to say that through it all, I know you talk about mental health and what this has done, but through it all, I think that what kept it all together for me was that I had support of a wonderful wife. And I can remember when I got promoted to major, and she was working out in Buffalo. And when they called to say they offered me the promotion, and I told the superintendent, well, I got to talk to my wife and see what it is, see what she thinks. And we talked that night. And one thing she said to me, she said, look, she said, you have to go. You have to take this, because you know that once you do this, it will open up doors for a lot of people. So off we packed up and we came here to Albany, and that brought us here back in, I think it's 1985 that we came here. So I had that support. And the other thing that I had my faith in God, and He has kept me. He has kept me through all of this and has been my redeemer. And just when things were down, I could get on my knees and talk to Him, and He would make things right. So I think that's an important thing, that when you stay close to Him and when you have God in your life, that you can make it through anything. So that is what I wanted to talk about. Hopefully it wasn't too boring, and I would now open it up to some questions and answers. Are we there?
Yes. Mr. Heritage, Ms. Isaac, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So since retiring, have you had the opportunity to observe how they train the state troopers, the difference of the curriculum, or the content, to be more, I guess, because the flack police officers get a lot of time is that I guess they say the personality might not be, well, not everybody, but some of the personalities might be suited. But do you think they get different kind of training now versus back when you started?
Oh yeah, it's obviously the training is they put in how to deal with certain situations, how to deal with minorities and other people, and it's always been the motto of the state police to be professional. They always said that you're professional if you can give a person a ticket, and then when they drive away, they say thank you. And so I think all of those things that we see today are being taught or integrated into the training of the state police. And I think that what's helped is they have a more diverse makeup today. I mean, there are, you know, as I said before, we have a personal caller that's a deputy superintendent that's pretty high up in the state police. We have females that are majors now. They have females that are majors now, and other things. So they've, since 1967, trust me, they've come a long way.
Yes. And then part two is like, um, you know, do you think no, more so now, you know, it's a lot of negative feedback, but you think that's more indicative of the moral decline of us as a nation, you know, as far as, you know, the negative feedback you guys get, because that's a difficult job to do, to be a police officer or a state trooper. It's everybody, you know, everybody criticizes, but they're not ready to step up and do that
Yeah,
that occupation.
it is a difficult thing, and I think what's made it even more difficult is the division that's come about in this country. Let's face it, we are really divided, truly divided, and that not only affects the citizenry, but that affects the profession of law enforcement, because you have to think that if the nation's divided, there are some divisions in there as to how to deal with people. And we see that every day. Even as you see with the, has things gotten better since the incident in Minneapolis? I don't know. We still see things that are occurring, and we see things that. I mean, let's look at what happened over at the mall, one of the malls in New Jersey, where there was two teenagers were fighting, one a color and the other one. The police respond. So what did they do? The first thing they did was set the other gentleman down at a couch, and then the personal caller they want to handcuff instead of finding out, you know, what's the issue. It would have been much easier and a simple solution to sit both of them down, since there's two officers, and try to resolve it that way, rather than taking one, putting your knee on your back and handcuffing. So you see, police, they have what I call a DP, that's decision points. That you're there, and I know you got to make a split decision, but the decision is what you're going to do at that time. What is the best way to handle this? And that all comes with training.
So Deacon Heritage, and for those of you, I call him Deacon Heritage because he's my deacon at the church I attend. And I actually have to give a shout out to his wife, Sister Fanny, because she and I sing in the choir together. But I just wanted to get your perspective. Obviously, you were in law enforcement for many years, and that was a big part of your life. But in terms of your civilian life, when you were everyday citizen, did you ever have any exchanges with law enforcement yourself, or is there a code or some secret signal that alerts another person in law enforcement to your background and all?
No, I've not had a negative experience at all. I haven't, you know. I'm kind of heavy on the pedal, and when we travel, because we travel before this pandemic came, because we still have children out in Buffalo and relatives and that, so we go out to Buffalo quite a bit, and I do get on the thruway, and I must confess that I do get heavy on the pedal, and sometimes, several times, I get stopped, and it's always been when they find out who I am and so forth, it's always been a pleasant experience for me. But I've never had a negative experience as a citizen, no.
So what advice would you give people, and especially people of color, who are in that situation where they're stopped by the police, whether it's local, state, and how they should respond. Because, you know, we all have heard that, especially for young Black males who are driving, many of them are given the talk about what they should do when they're stopped. And obviously, we've seen cases where they've done that and still it gets, you know, the end result is unfortunate.
Yeah, well, as you said, we give our children and young Black males the talk about what to do, but the simple thing is you should be polite, you shouldn't be argumentative, you should do what they ask you, produce your license, your registration, and not argue, and just follow their commands that they're giving you. If there is an issue, then you can always make a complaint uh, as to what happened. But uh, I would say that is the best way to prevent, or should be the best way to prevent a negative experience. But that depends on the other side. I mean, whether you get stopped by someone who has negative feelings towards you or whatever, uh, that may not always result in anything positive. But if you do those things and not try to do otherwise, I mean, it should be that things should not turn into negativity. Or hopefully, we would hope that they wouldn't.
And what about those who may be witness to something like that? In this day and age, with availability of cell phones and cameras, you know, you can record any negative witness of any negative interactions, but what about stopping it from getting worse? What about intervening when you witness something that is getting escalating on the negative end?
You mean intervening as a citizen with the
As a
police?
citizen, yeah, as a witness to, as a citizen witnessing something.
Well, if you witness something, and as you said, you've got cell phones and you're recording and things, you see what's happened with these recordings. I mean, there's a lot of things that wouldn't happen if they weren't recorded. And now that they can be, yes. But I would say that you as a citizen, you cannot get in the middle of whatever the police are trying to do, whether it's wrong or not. I would say, I think someone had the thought to call the police when they saw something occurring, and that may be what you need to do. Is if you see something that's not right, to call 911 and let them know, get that on the record. But as far as trying to interfere with what the police are doing, no, that's not a good idea. I would say you've got your recording and record it for future reference. And thank goodness we've had that done. Because if it hadn't been done, there's a lot of things that would have not gotten resolved.
Yeah, Mr. Heritage, yeah, I think I agree with you on your point where you got to be cooperative and be polite to the officer, because the officer is going to be a little edge because it's the unknown that they're approaching the car. They don't know what's going on as well. I'll say, in my experience, 99% of my experiences have been pretty good. And I've been caught speeding going almost 100. So in Southwest Virginia, and I paid a fine. So I
Hmm.
mean, I was fortunate. The
Yeah.
only the only negative interaction I've had with police was I was a young sailor and stationed in Bethesda, Maryland, and me and my buddies, we were going to downtown DC to hang out, and this car was tailing us, and we probably had like five of us in this car, and in DC, the lights, they synchronize, like it should, and this car was like tailgating us, and we went through three yellow lights because if we would have hit the brakes, we thought this car was gonna rear end us, and we didn't know it was like an unmarked car, and they flipped the lights and they pulled us over, and the driver, this guy was from Texas. He's like, "Oh man, it's the cops." He's like, "I'm gonna give them a piece of my mind." I'm like, "Dude, just shut up." I don't think he's ever experienced that before. I was like, "Keep your hand on the steering wheel." They order us out of the car, slam us on the hood, kicked our legs out. They roughed up us a little bit, but you know, I was telling them, I was like, you just do what they say, man. You know, and I think it just depends on who you get and then the attitude that you get
Right,
back.
right,
But also, if somebody's determined to do something, there's nothing you can really do to stop them. Just like a patient that once commits suicide, if somebody really wants to do something bad, and there's nothing you can really do other than, I'll say, you control your actions. You can't control somebody else's responses, but I'll tell my son, you can control your actions. You can't control the other person, but you might be able to mitigate, some of the harm, or maybe you know, the,
right,
the best scenario might work out. That's my best
right.
advice.
I don't know if a lot of people think about this, but I think about it a lot. And you see what's going on in the news and across the country and everything. But this country is terribly divided, and I don't know. I really don't know where we're going to go from here. I mean, it is truly a divided country, and it seems like daily things get worse. And you don't want to be a pessimist about these things, but when you see what's going on across the country, and you hear certain people, and I mean our elected officials and people, you hear their rhetoric and the things that they're saying and what they're talking about that are just further pulling us apart. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years. It's if you really sit down and think about it, it's a scary thought as to which way this country could go.
Deacon Heritage, I agree with you. I live in a suburb of Albany, right outside the city, and they're back in the summer a year ago when there were protests regarding George Floyd's death, murder, and people were protesting. I saw, with my own eyes, and I've always felt that there was some bias in law enforcement, just because have friends who are Black police officers who discuss that even they, being police officers, hear racial statements made, whether it's against a fellow police officer or a perp, you know.
Mhm.
That was my 1980s TV lingo, that right there, perp. I always wanted to use that word in a sentence, but anyway. but um but seriously though, and so at this rally that I attended, and I just kind of attended to observe, because many of the people that were protesting were white and complaining about George Floyd's murder. But what really bothered me was that as cars were driving by, there were some vehicles that were police vehicles and in support of the counter protesters, just making it obvious that their support was with the counter protesters. And then I was also shocked to see that when a fire truck drove by, they too made it known that their support was for the counter protesters, so the group that gathered to say they support the police and everything. And so my concern is that, most people are not against the police. I mean, we need the police when we feel threatened in the community, or we need the fire department to respond to any life-threatening event, whether it be fire or someone faints or whatever. But it was just so jarring for me to see people who I would instinctively call if I needed help show how political they can be. You know what I mean? Because I feel
Yes.
like when you're in certain positions of authority, you should take a neutral stance, that your responsibilities are to help the citizens. That's what you get paid to. Taxpayer money goes towards, paying your salary. And just to see, like you said, going back to what you said, seeing that division so blatant was very, very jarring.
Yeah, it's I can fully understand, and as we talk about one of I think, and this is my personal feeling, is it was good and it was bad, but I think one of the biggest, it's not all, but one of the biggest things with law enforcement and police agencies is the unions that are staunch in standing up against change. Um, we know that the federal government tried to change and put changes in effect, and you see that that just couldn't happen. They couldn't agree, and now that since George Floyd, that's gone by the way. So where are the changes that were supposed to be made? They're not changes. It's like we're going back to business as usual in some of the places. Some of the places have changed and are trying to change, but some of them it's just business as usual. And you know,
I think it
that's
comes.
yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. I think it comes down, when we make these this criticism, is generalized upon the whole group.
Mhm.
People, they don't say bad cops suck. They just say cops suck.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't know how many Jets fans we have out here, but the Jets suck. Do all Jets suck? Probably not. It's got some great players on them, right? But
Uh,
generally the Jets suck.
yeah.
I don't want to
Well,
offend any Jets fans out there. I'm
you
a
know,
Giants fan.
well, I listen. Me, all I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, so as far as I'm concerned, all Jets suck.
Hey, we agree.
But
We
but
agree.
you're right, and people understand. There's bad teachers, they're bad doctors, they're bad. Every professional has them, and we don't say, well, all teachers are bad or all doctors are bad or what have you. I mean, so yeah, I firmly believe that 99% of all police officers are good, and their intent is to make uh, life better for everybody, to protect and to serve everybody, and to make sure that peace is maintained. But as every professional, there are those bad apples that are there, and I think those bad apples need to be weeded out, and definitely need to be weeded out because it's like a fireman. You know, a police officer can go to a scene, and if he can save somebody, doesn't make any difference to them. They're black, white, or whatever. They're the first ones there. They're going to charge in and they're going to try to save them. You know, the same thing with a fireman. He's not saying, "Oh, I ain't going in that house because that." No, he's going in the house and he's going to try to do the best to save what he can, even if he puts his life at risk. He's risking his life. And people have to understand that police officers put on a uniform, they go to work, and every day they don't know whether they're coming home. Because you don't think about it, but there's always that that thing that they may not come home. But as I said, 99% of police officers are do the job in a professional way. But we just have those bad apples that make it bad for everybody.
Very tough job. Well, Mr. Heritage, so Claire wrote us. She wrote, she cited a source. The Atlantic reported last year that America is losing its black police officers. NYPD alone has seen a 14% drop since 2008, and one of the issues is recruiting from minority communities due to a lack of trust. She
Mhm.
said, "Can you shed some light on this issue and maybe offer suggestions?"
Well, I think that, because of these incidents that have happened um, over the past couple of years or so, that's going to be a problem. Um, and I know when I was with the state police, we tried to recruit, and we did recruit, but it's an issue, and everybody's trying to resolve this issue, but it's an issue that is going to be take some thought, and it's going to be difficult to try to change minds. I mean, when I came on, it was like you became a police officer because you wanted to change things. You always said, you can't change things from without. You have to be within to change things. But I think what's happened with this last few years, it's turned everybody off, and nobody wants to put on that uniform and go out there as a police officer. And it's going to be until, here's what I say, until police departments change, and until they can get faith with the community that they're doing the right thing and they're there for them, it's going to be a difficult problem to recruit from the minority community. There's no doubt about that. It's going to be difficult. I mean, you know, I can remember growing up as a young man, and that the police were revered, and they were, you know, you had an officer that walked the beat. They weren't in the cars, they would walk the beat. And I can remember this one officer, his name was Smitty, and everybody in the neighborhood feared Smitty because they know that Smitty, he didn't play. And he was feared, but he was loved. I mean, if you got in trouble or you doing something wrong, he'd grab you by the scuff of your neck and he would bring you home to your parents, you know, and then you'd get it. But you, from them and everybody, but you don't have that today. That doesn't happen today. There's not that relationship with the community. And that's a bad thing. When years gone by and we didn't have these problems, you know, there was that relationship with the police walking the beat and knowing who lived there, and they had that respect. But so it's going to be a problem trying to recruit.
And if I can add to that, I think too, like you said, the division that's going on in our country right now, and how some people are very bold about expressing their hatred for others. And I can't imagine being, you know, a police officer, and obviously, you know, like you said, it's a very dangerous job. You don't know if you're going to be going home later in the day, and so you're dealing with that, you know, in the community. And then in the same precinct, you're dealing with people who are, you know, explicit about how they feel about people of color, you know?
Yeah.
And then if you add in the mix pay, I mean, it's a tragedy that, you know, pay for police officers and firemen, people like you said, or whose lives are put in direct line of danger every single day, are paid less than politicians or celebrities, or, you know, when was the last time Brad Pitt saved your life? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So it's
right.
like, it's just, it's a tragedy.
Yeah, you're so right about that. You're so right about that. And it's not it's, you know, it's not only police or firemen or whatever. It's also teachers that are, you know, that play a role in this whole thing. I mean, there's so many people that play roles in you know, in these issues of today. I mean, you know, not to go awry, but look at how they're fighting, teaching history, Black history, teaching the history of this country. You want to do away with the history as if it never happened, but it did happen.
Yeah, I think it got out of control last summer with the when they was tearing down the monuments and stuff like that.
Yeah. Mhm.
I think that the thought process was that, you know, if it's history, then there's a proper place for it, and so they were just, um, you know, moving brashly and quickly just to tear these things down without any thought of like where they can they appropriately be maintained. And like you say, it's history. It's history. So, you know, like in Germany, I don't know what they do, but you know, they could have established a proper place for these things to have context and teach it so you don't repeat history. You
Right.
know, that's we're supposed to be learners of history. So by you tearing it down and throwing it away or trying to hide it, then I think that was part of the precipitous to what's going on now with the CRT.
Right. 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 Do we have any more comments or questions?
And I just wanted to kind of go back to Claire's, her comment. I think another contributing factor is that it's obvious that race is a big issue for officers. There have been a couple of maybe more than a couple high-profile stories where police officers were in the line of duty, they were undercover, and they were shot, and wounded, and I think there have even been a few cases where they were actually killed because they were thought to have been the suspect,
Mhm.
and not the officer. So I think again, race is a big factor, and the anger in this country, um, and just again, people feeling emboldened. Before, I think many people could get a vibe from people they knew may have certain racist tendencies, and you knew to keep your distance from them. And maybe, then that may not have been the best way to navigate life, but now it's like in your face. This is what I think of you, and there's doesn't seem to be any reprieve. There doesn't seem to be anyone standing up who can influence these people who have this hatred, and say to them, listen, these are your fellow Americans, accept it. You know what I mean? I mean,
Right.
it drives me crazy because we can have a Super Bowl, or we can have an Olympics, or a playoffs or whatever, and we have people of different color, working together as a team, and then you see the fans in the audience. But it's like once people leave those environments, they go back, many of them go back to discriminating towards one another, hating. And I don't know, I really don't understand that.
Yeah, well, you're right. It's what used to be um, kept, I would say, undercover is now become blatant, and it's out in the open, and it's how we feel, and that's it. And we're going to let you know it, and that's it. You're right. It's so blatant out there now. It really is. Yeah. Okay.
Well, we thank you for your time, Mr. Heritage, and we thank our visitors and our guests for joining in on this presentation. And oh, we have one more. Anissa, are you asking a question, or are you just saying thanks?
I was just saying, thank you so much for your
Okay.
presentation.
Oh,
I was like, Nissa's smart. She's on it. No, thanks everybody for participating and joining. And you guys have a great, safe weekend. I know it's snowing out. Some people aren't privileged to work from home. Danielle and Sean and Anthony, but no, have a great weekend. We thank you so much for your questions, comments, and again, Deacon Heritage for your time.
well, thank you. It's been my pleasure. It's been my pleasure. And I agree with you. Everybody stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you so
thank you.
much.
Mhm. Thank you.
Thank you.